the unforgettable moments video games have given us, there are likewise just as many frustrating or downright puzzling ones, which have caused players to wonder just what developers were thinking. While inevitably there will be development limitations, these can occasionally lead to strokes of genius, such as Silent Hill 2's fog being used to mask the game's technical issues. But not all creative choices were the right call. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 real reasons behind annoying video game moments. Number 10. Far Cry 3, Vas Death. From the first trailers and images of the third installment of the Far Cry series, audiences were instantly captivated with the crazed pirate Vas. This was all thanks to Michael Mando's stellar performance, which made Vas an instant fan favorite. Given his prominence within the marketing, his menacing charisma, and that he was the first villain that protagonist Jason encountered, it looked like Vas was being set up to be the main antagonist. However, players' infatuation with this character was brought to a crushing end when he was unceremoniously killed off before the final act. While our dreams of an intense final showdown with Vas were cut short, we're lucky the character ever appeared at all. Originally, Vas wasn't supposed to be as prominent in the game. Rather, he was to be a mindless but hulking henchman named Bull. The character as we know him didn't begin to take form until Mando's audition, which was so good that the team decided to change his design to fit with the actor's performance. Vas would go through some more transformations, including another henchman called Pyro, before the developers nailed down who this character should be. However, knowing Vas's design roots doesn't make accepting his fate any easier. Number 9. GoldenEye 007, a lackluster port. GoldenEye 007 is, without exaggeration, one of the most fondly remembered titles of the N64 era. Thanks to complicated licensing issues, the likelihood of a re-release of this game were low. It's understandable then why there was plenty of excited buzz when GoldenEye made its return on the Xbox and Nintendo Switch 15 years after its initial release. But this was far from the ideal comeback that fans were hoping for, especially when it came to the Xbox version. Alongside the lack of online multiplayer on Microsoft's console, the game was locked at the original 30 frames per second and featured some noticeably bad textures and audio issues. There was a reason for this though, as developers Code Mystic clarified on Twitter, and it's down to the technical aspects of the emulation itself. In short, the developers were using the original ROM code for the game, which simply wasn't built to run at higher frame rates. Likewise, the switch to higher resolutions and audio quality similarly drew attention to the game's shortcomings. Balancing modernization and authenticity is difficult when remastering older games. Though trying to remain as authentic to the original as possible, this version of the game proved to be inferior to the game that fans remember. Number 8. Souls Lost Izalith wasn't finished. There are plenty of reasons to be justifiably frustrated with Dark Souls. There are plenty of points in this game where players will want to reach for the power button, but there's one area that makes even the most seasoned Souls player grimace at the mere thought of it: Lost Izalith. A chasm filled with numerous dragon butts and more lava than necessary, the sparseness of this location caused fans to speculate that the area was unfinished, and they were correct. Since the game's release, developers, including creator Hidetaka Miyazaki, have spoken in interviews about how this area was rushed in development. They simply didn't have the time to do anything else with the level. Moreover, a greater problem arose when it came to designing that area's boss, the Bed of Chaos. A boss so bad that even Miyazaki has come to regret including him. According to the director, he was unable to pin down exactly what he wanted this boss to be. With deadlines fast approaching and frustrations growing amongst the team, they had no choice but to include what they had. Number 7. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, The High Road. Originally released back in 1996, Crash Bandicoot was a colourful and challenging platformer that saw the titular marsupial leap and spin their way across a selection of wacky levels. The news of a remastered collection that would bring the cherished trilogy to new consoles was understandably very exciting for fans of the series. However, it was only a matter of time before players noticed that there was something funny going on with the jumping mechanics in the first game. This was especially noticeable during the already notoriously difficult level, the High Road, which saw Crash cross a precarious bridge comprised of icy planks, wandering enemies, and deadly pitfalls. Overcoming these obstacles now proved a fiendish task that required precision timing and accuracy, making an already stressful level even more frustrating. It turned out there was a reason for this unexpected difficulty spike. Developers Vicarious Visions had tweaked the jumping in this game so that it matched the third Crash. While the goal was to streamline the player's experience across the trilogy, the reality was was High Road simply wasn't built with those tweaks in mind. Although the developers' intentions were good, they nevertheless made one of the hardest parts of the PlayStation Classic even harder. Number 6, Bioshock, the final boss fight. Taking place in the enrapturing underwater city of Rapture, that's went to ruin by the time the mute protagonist arrives, Bioshock is, for many reasons, one of the greatest games ever made. The game begins with the disembodied voice of Atlas on a radio requesting the players' help to rescue their family. From here, players learn more about what happened to the collapsing utopia as their journey takes them further into its depths. After mind-blowing revelations concerning who the protagonist and Atlas are, concluding in the game's second act, Bioshock takes a turn for the worst at the final hurdle, when the time finally comes for the boss fight against Fontaine. The encounter is as generic and uninteresting as possible. It's a bum note that ended an otherwise spectacular game. Moreover, the developers knew it too. The problem was, though, they didn't know what else to do. Speaking in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2016, creator Ken Levine explained that the team didn't have much experience making video games, and were therefore unsure how to end it. They simply couldn't think of any better ideas and gave us what they had. Despite this monstrous blunder, though, Bioshock nevertheless remains a staggeringly good video game. Number 5, Deus Ex Human Revolution, badly balanced boss fights. Set within a dystopian cyberpunk future, Deus Ex Human Revolution saw players step back into the cybernetically augmented shoes of Adam Jensen, as he became swept up in a grand globe-trotting conspiracy while on the hunt for a terrorist organization. As with the original game released 10 years prior, Human Revolution gave players the tools they needed to approach objectives how they liked. This was an ambitious RPG in which player choice took center stage. However, although this title was well received, it did have one major issue, and that was the boss fights. Unlike the rest of the game, there was no non-lethal option during these encounters, meaning that stealthy players quickly found themselves struggling against the first boss, a bullet sponge named Lawrence Barrett. The reason for this blunder was that developers Eidos Montreal decided to outsource the boss fights to another studio, Grip Entertainment, because they simply didn't have enough time to create them in-house. However, Grip boss Paul Krasuski later confessed he didn't know much about Deus Ex when he went into the project. Unsure how to best balance these fights, the team opted for a more action-heavy approach to give players an exhilarating experience. Thankfully, these boss encounters were amended for the director's cut. Number 4, SpiderMan Mary Janes stealth missions. Insomniac's Spider-Man proved to be a high-flying outing as everyone's favorite web-slinging superhero. Alongside the fantastically fluid traversal and satisfying combat, there was likewise a surprising amount of heart at its core for this spectacular PlayStation outing. In between the swinging and crime fighting, however, even this acclaimed gem had its share of issues, and one of the most aggravating was the inclusion of forced stealth sections while playing as Mary Jane Watson. As tediously dull as these missions proved to be, the developers did mean well by including them. In an interview with Kinda Funny Games, creative director Brian Interhard described that there were several reasons why they believed they were a solid idea. In addition to slowing the action down to break up the pacing, an aim they succeeded in a little too well, Interhard explained that the team didn't want to see MJ as a damsel in distress again, and thought it would be interesting to explore what it would be like playing as someone without superpowers in a world of superheroes. While the developers did succeed in their goals, the problem was that these sections simply weren't engaging to play. There's no place for 4 stealth sections in modern games. Number 3, Mass Effect 3. The ending wasn't always terrible. For all the breathtaking highs that the Mass Effect trilogy took us on, BioWare's series has nevertheless been forever marred by a cataclysmically anticlimactic ending that took games worth of meaningful choices and heart-wrenching plots and tossed them out the window. With the Reaper invasion now underway at the start of Mass Effect 3, Shepard and their crew must do what they can to amass the forces needed for the final showdown, the one that's been 3 games in the making. What happens instead, though, is that Shepard is given a set of options which dictate what ending players get. However, according to lead writer Drew Karpyshyn, Mass Effect 3's ending was originally supposed to be entirely different. Rather than the divisive finale fans got, an earlier idea saw the Reapers destroyed alongside the mass relays, consequently isolating the various races across the galaxy. This would likewise be the premise for what would have been Mass Effect 4. Unfortunately, due to a combination of a rushed production and online leaks resulting in developers having to change major plot points only weeks from release, release. The team were forced into streamlining the ending to meet the deadline. If circumstances were different, Mass Effect's ending should have been quite a bit better. Number 2, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the end of Atari. While the other entries on this list account for one specific moment of gaming frustration, the Atari 2600 adaptation of E.T. was so infamously terrible that it wasn't only dubbed the worst game ever made, it's recognized as one of the reasons behind the 1980s video game crash, as well as Atari's eventual downfall. With Spielberg's film becoming a pop culture juggernaut, Atari wanted to capitalize on the film's success and snapped up the license to make the game for an obscene amount of money. Spielberg requested that Atari developer Howard Scott Warshaw create the game following Warshaw's success with Yar's Revenge and the Raiders of the Lost Ark tie-in. Alongside a ridiculous amount of money riding on this game's success, Warshaw had the insane deadline of just 5 weeks to complete the game, so it could be released in time for the holiday season. What he produced in that time, however, was an indecipherable mess of pitfalls that saw the titular alien search for pieces of a phone so that he could return home. Nobody liked it, and thousands of cartridges were dumped in the desert. Had Warshaw had a week or two longer, the gaming industry could be quite different today. Number 1, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, the missing ending. When Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain ended so abruptly, eyebrows were raised after fans discovered footage for a cut level titled Mission 52 on a bonus disc that came with the collector's edition. More than simply a deleted scene, this level would have served as a more satisfying conclusion for the game, which tied up loose plot threads. Though Konami have maintained that this level was nothing more than cancelled content that was, quote, definitely not the ending, the significance of this axed mission suggests otherwise. The reality is that the Phantom Pain, alongside Silent Hills, was an unfortunate casualty of the fallout between game director Hideo Kojima and publisher Konami. While excitement for both Kojima's titles were at fever pitch, Konami announced in March of 2015 that they would be undergoing a corporate restructuring. What this meant was Kojima and Kojima Productions were being buried. Alongside Kojima's name being removed from branding, Konami employees were being treated terribly, with some developers reportedly demoted to janitorial positions. All of this was because Konami executives wanted to shift their focus from console games to a mobile-first approach, a ruthless corporate decision which came at the cost of the publisher's best dev team and creative mind. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other real reasons behind annoying video game moments. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account, where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.